This week's guest is more than an inspirational speaker. His life story is an inspiration to all who strive to achieve their full potential, no matter what adversity we may face. John Register is a two-time Paralympian, Paralympic Games silver medalist, Persian Gulf War veteran, and TEDx motivational speaker. He embraced a new normal in becoming an amputee following a misstep over a hurdle while training for the 1996 Olympic Games after participation in 2 consecutive Olympic trials. An Oak Park, Illinois native, Register discovered how to amputate his fear of disability and founded the U.S. Olympic Committee military sport program in the early 2000s. He has launched a book titled 10 Power Stories to Impact Any Leader, Journal Your Way to Leadership Success, as business leaders return to work with their staff amid stressful circumstances surrounding the coronavirus pandemic and the recent unrest in our urban cities. John Register, welcome to Next Steps Forward.
Hey, Chris, great to be on with you. Oh my gosh, ready to take the next steps. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
No, really appreciate your time. I know how busy you are, so thank you. So John, I mentioned the Persian Gulf War, your Paralympic experience, the book, and your speaking career, but obviously you had a life before all that. Where does the John Register story start? And take us up to the Persian Gulf War, please.
Well, I think we go back I don't know where to even start on that question, but, I think the most important place is when I think about, kind of getting the acumen that we all might get in life, who do we learn those lessons from? It really stemmed from my parents, my mother, my father, Don and Dolores Register, and the family that we have, which really inputted a lot of information, a lot of history, a lot of knowledge, a lot of advocacy, a lot of commitments into building us into who we are. For example, my dad was jailed in Hattiesburg, Mississippi for the right to vote. Just right before that, of course, you might recall that some of the voter laws there would have African Americans coming in and having to do a poll tax or answer questions before they could actually vote. So this was something that was that they did, and he was jailed for that. And we look further on in the in what he accomplished is that the same jail that he was jailed in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, when that judge left, an African-American woman was placed in. So we see the impacts and effects of making those commitments and those choices that are not necessarily hard. It's not the mainstream. My uncle, Gloucester Current Sr., was in charge on the March on Washington, all the platform speakers. So I didn't know all these things growing up because I was a little tyke. But later on, when I'm looking at him in the Oval Office and how he said that we have to fight with the pen more than our fist, right? It was something that really helped me to understand and frame a lot of what I did and what a lot of what I do still today in life, in all aspects of life. So yeah, that's kind of where I think the John Register story starts.
Well, and with yesterday being Martin Luther King Jr. Day, it is very timely. And thank you for sharing those stories, because those are fascinating. And it's great to hear positive reflections back in terms of how things have changed over the last several decades. Obviously, unfortunately, there's still a lot more work to be done. But hearing about an African-American female judge being put in place there, certainly a step in the right direction.
Right. And it's not that it's just because she's placed there because she's African-American and female. It's because she has the talent, the skills, and the abilities. And where we find is, the disconnect in the conversation many times, we're talking about making some commitments in life, is that the disconnects happen when we say, just get educated, just make sure that you are, networking well. But if I don't have opportunity, even though I've done all those things, then I'm locked out of the system. And so we're talking about equity and fairness and parity in those things. And I think that's really where I come in my voice right now to help us, not just with inside of equity with racial injustice and those type of things, but in all aspects. What are the commitments that we're making in our own lives? And I know we're going to get into that and talk about that a little bit later, but I think that's a good framing of, how I show up in society. And it's not a bashing and putting things on people, but it's really, what are you going to do with the information that you have been given? And that's where I think that we start.
And you mentioned diversity and equity, and I've talked to several guests about, the buzz phrase, I'll use air quotes around that today in corporate speak, is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And
right. And
we need to get to the point where it's not, a buzzword. It's just part of who and what we are. And it's part of the fabric of what that organization and we as people are.
And the great thing is, can we move to a place where we don't even need to talk about it?
Exactly.
Right? Can we just be in concert with ourselves? And I think the underlying tone on DE&I, underneath all of it lies belonging. Because if I don't feel as if I belong, or a person says that only you got in there because you're a female judge, right? Then I don't equate your success to the commitments that you've made in your life. And so I look at you differently. And why am I looking at you differently? Who told me that I should look at you in a different way? Was it society? Was it other people? Those are the hard questions that we have to ask ourselves, that we'll jump into to help us all expand and grow, I think, a little bit further.
And we will get to those. So let's go back to your military service.
Sure.
The Persian Gulf War. And first of all, thank you for your service, sir.
Ooh. Thank you.
The Persian Gulf War itself was very brief. January 17th, 1991 to February 28th, 1991. But the buildup and wind down took much longer. Why did you join the military, and how did it shape or change your life journey?
So I joined the military because of very selfish reasons. It was a means to an end. I graduated from the University of Arkansas, go Pigs, almost beat Alabama. I graduated with a degree in communications, radio, television, programming, and production. I was going to take a job in Mississippi, but I didn't, I went to an Olympic trials, and I wanted to make sure that I got all this running out of my system. And I was in the mall, I saw a recruiter's office, and I saw a poster for the world-class athlete program, which allows a soldier athlete to train for 3 years prior to an Olympic Games as a soldier athlete. So I said, I think I can make this program. Recruiter did not lie to me and said that's going to be tough to make, but I think that you can make with your accolades as a runner, as a 4-time All-American. And he was right. I did. I made it. I joined up, and that was my entry. Where it shifted for me, Chris, was when I walked the parade field after basic training on graduation day, because I understood all of the brothers and sisters that walked that parade field at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and full battle rattle and the military dress uniform, and saluting the officers that were up there, and saying that we have signed up to protect our country against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and protect the Constitution of the United States of America. And so that's the gravitas, I think, that really went into me, and I understood I was now part of this legacy. So that was something that resonated with me, and I wanted to be a lifer. So I took the officer selection battery. I qualified for the officer candidate school. I kept that in my back pocket because I could keep that to 35. And so I went off to try to run track and field. Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm came up when I made the team, and I was diverted to the Gulf War. So because we sign up to fight, and that's what military folks do. We fight. So we got over there, and I spent 6 months, just shy of 6 months in the desert, in the sandbox, in the Saudi Arabia and Iraq, and a little bit outside of Kuwait. And it was a fascinating experience, right? It was something I would not trade and want to do again. I was praying for our brothers and sisters in arms that continue to fight to keep our freedoms. But it was a great learning experience, and again shaped who I would become all along the way.
So let's talk about a very difficult day. Your hurtling accident was absolutely horrific. You landed wrong and severed an artery that results in the amputation of your leg. I've never heard of an accident of that severity happening in track and field. Did you realize the severity of the injury right away?
Oh, I knew it was severe. So, yeah, my leg was looking like the letter L. So if you ever seen one of those, the Joe Theismann, I think is the perfect example for those that follow football, know who Joe Theismann, the quarterback that was injured, and we saw his leg kind of just fold underneath him. So my leg went the other way. It hyperextended after I landed, and it did, when I fell to the ground, it did like a backwards helicopter spin. And I could see my shin pass in front of my face before I hit the ground. So I knew the injury was severe, and I was not going to be running any longer. I think what happened, though, on the track is I'm a person of faith. When I say faith, I mean Christ. And so what happened was, I had been leading like these Bible studies and stuff, and what's on the inside of you during your time of testing actually comes out. And so so we don't get, like our character before the test comes. We don't get it. We can learn from it afterwards, but our character is revealed during the test. And so eyewitness accounts said, the first word out of my mouth was like, hallelujah. And I don't remember any of that. I don't at all. I remember being a lot of pain that took over. But that was a testimony of other people saying what was on the inside of me during that specific moment of the most arduous time, one of the most arduous times in my life. And the military community, remember, a lot of them had been through Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm. So they knew the triage. They knew what to do. I even knew about it, and I was processing. Don't drink water because that will send you into shock. Stay calm. Control your heartbeat. All these things to try to survive that we were taught in the military. They come back when the pressure is on. So yeah, it was a very tough day, but so glad I had that military experience and my brothers and sisters around me to help me get through that moment in time.
And what happened between the moment you landed and sustained the injury up to the decision to amputate your leg?
I don't remember so much of that moment. It was very foggy because once the ambulance arrived, they started pumping me with this drug called morphine. So I was in and out and loopy, and and the doctors reduced my knee and figured out they weren't getting a blood reading, a pulse reading to my big toe with their Doppler testing device, and they realized my artery probably is either blocked or severed. So they medevaced me. The doctors medevaced me from Hays, Kansas, to Wichita, Kansas, where I underwent a 17-hour vein graft operation. And during that time, I went in and out of stuff. I remember kind of waking up at various moments, but I remember very vividly Dr. Randy Mullins from Wichita, the Wesley Medical Center, coming in with my wife, Alice, holding on to my hand, and my mom on the opposite side of the bed, and my son, John Jr., playing with the little toy train at the foot of the bed, saying, "Hey, John, you got a tough choice to make. You can either keep your leg and use a walker or a wheelchair for the rest of your life, or I can amputate your leg and you can use a prosthesis for the rest of your life. Your choice." What kind of choice is that? Right? So these things had, came in. I realized quickly I was not going to the Olympic Games with the way I was running or the way my leg was, and it was going to be, facing an amputation. So that part of my life was really over. And it was really the pain that spoke, because my male deductive reasoning said, if I get rid of the leg, I can get rid of the pain. So I told Dr. Mullins, I know it has to be amputated. And he went into work. I mean, he went kind of matter-of-factly. They did the amputation. Sergeant Major McKinney, who became later the first African-American Sergeant Major of the United States Army, who I was serving under as an enlisted service member over in Germany at the time. He was my USAR Sergeant Major. He came over with his twin brother to watch the closure operation on me. So I had a lot of great support, Chris, during that time. My wife, after it was over with, and I'm trying to question, did I make the right decision after the leg's gone, right? Because I woke up from that surgery in more pain than my male deductive reasoning had reasoned. And I was alone in the hospital room, and no one was around me at that point in time, because they sent my wife home. The doctors and the nurses sent her home because, not home, but, to the local hotel, because I was going to sleep through the night, they thought. And I woke up and I was alone and in more pain. And I wanted the morphine drip to knock the pain out. I couldn't reach it because I couldn't roll over. I was too weak. I wanted to reach out to the nurse's aid station right outside the door, but the tube sat down my throat, made the sound too inaudible to get their attention. So I just laid there with my dangerous thoughts for the next 8 hours. Who am I now? What's my identity? Is my wife going to stay with me? I saw so many military families break up after the war. Is my son still going to see me as his father? Do I still have a job in the military? Can I support my family? I mean, my Olympic dreams are over. All of those things were in my head, and my wife saw me struggling when she came in, ticked off that I woke up and she wasn't there to be with me. She calmed me by saying, we know what, John, we're going to get through this time together. It's just our new normal. And that really became the underlying framework of part 2 of who I will begin to become. What does that mean, this new normal existence? A lot of times in our lives today, bringing this forward, we look at it as a jaded kind of comment. We don't look at it as something that actually brings us and elevates us. most of the time we're looking at one of two ways, this new normal, that it's a past state that I can do nothing about. I can't go back there. For example, we'll say, I just wait till things I just can't wait till things get back to normal. Or we look at it as a future or a present system where we can't do anything about, where I guess this is just our new normal, can't do anything about it. So both of those leave us powerless. And that's why we kind of get jaded. I look at it very different now as I've come a long way, that new is no prior point of reference. And normal is the everyday typical occurrence of a thought or an action. So if new is no prior point of reference, why am I trying to use old things, old systems, old ways to put into a new environment to get a different result? That's the definition of insanity. But we all did it, right? I don't get my leg back. We don't get back some of the things that we want back and desire. So as soon as we get to a point like that, that is our reckoning moment. So that's where, I try to help people now as I understood it for myself in my life.
So let's talk about your new normal for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
How soon after the accident did you decide you were going to participate in the Paralympics, and how did the idea come into your head?
Yeah, well, that was a freaky move because I knew nothing about the Paralympic Games. It was my old coach, Remy Korchimny, who's now, I think, 92 years old, still just a brilliant man that started all the sprint stuff in the United States. But he found out about the Paralympic Games and said, "Hey, John, these Russian, John, you need to do Paralympic sport." No, so get back in game, right? So it was like it was this not to do it. He was really saying, it's time to activate. It's time to move. I know you're resting and you're recovering. You're trying to figure. Now's the time to push. So I swam for physical therapy. I got fast in the water. Got a little coach, Mark Stanley. And through that new normal mindset that Alice gave me, that swimming kind of got me active. I wasn't trying to make a Paralympic team. I was just trying to become active, get the drugs out of my system, come back to a routine, the rituals that develop into a rhythm, the rhythm which elevates me to a rise, the rise that creates a result, and the results that do a couple of things, re-inspire me or allow other people that are watching the process to catch their own vision. That's all I was trying to do. But I kept getting faster in the water, and I wound up putting a goal up to try to make the qualifying standard for the Paralympic Games in the sport of swimming. And I was so far away from it, like 7 seconds in the 100-meter freestyle. So there's no way I was going to make the team. That was the least thing on my mind. But at the swim trials, which I did make, I made the qualifying standard. I swam 100th of a second slower than the qualifying time I needed for the Paralympic Games itself. So I left, gravy cloud nine. I can't believe in the course of like 18 months, 19 months, or 26, maybe, whatever. I made this, I made a better time. And so I was really happy about my performance. And then I get a call from Coach Cal from Catholic University on our team. And he says, "Why did you leave before we announced the team?" I said, "I didn't make it. I got this time. I didn't make it." He said, "Well, idiot," right? Air quotes. He says, in the sport of swimming, even though you didn't make the 100-meter freestyle, at the flip turn, your time was lower than the qualifying time for the Paralympic Games. So we have picked you up for our relay team. And I was like, wait a minute. I just went from a 400-meter hurdler to a swimmer. And I'm making the Paralympic Games as a swimmer. So I was, that was really kind of hard to process. So I learned a lot during that time. I was never trying to be in the medals or anything like that. I never thought about that. It was just over the moon just to make a team on a parallel pathway. And it was at those games that I saw athletes running and jumping and on artificial limbs. And that's when I decided, okay, this parallel path can actually get me to what I really wanted to do on the track and field and try to win a medal at the games in Sydney, Australia.
Phenomenal. That's just incredible.
Crazy, right?
Like you said, from hurdling to swimming, that's incredible. So you said that commitment is such an important part of our lives.
Mm.
And as a hurdler and swimmer, you were the one who had to make a commitment to the hurdles because the coach and crowd can't do that for a competitor.
Yeah.
How do we make that commitment, find that singular focus to achieve what we want to achieve in our professional or personal lives?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the reason I say that is because a lot of times we don't commit. And when we don't commit, we live a life of either justification, right? We're justifying to ourselves and others why we're not courageous enough to make the commitment in the first place. Or it could be a little bit of regret. So I regret I did not ask that, that lady out to dance or on a date or to marriage. I regret that I didn't take that course in business because now I'm a little bit behind. I think what we have to do, in my opinion, is to understand that there's no going back and there's no living in regret. There's no solace there, because that's something that you can't do anything about. It's just like what we talked about earlier. I don't get my leg back. So therefore, the faster I can come to that realization, that point of reckoning of what I share, is an understanding that I don't get those things back, the faster I can begin to commit to a vision of what's coming up next. And that's where I really spend a lot of time. I don't do a lot of things in kind of the self-awareness, self-development in terms of how do I get you there to make that commitment. I help you build the momentum to make the jump that you have to make. And then on the other side, once you've made that commitment, help you try to learn that you have to now unlearn what you previously knew to relearn in order to elevate to this next level. I don't think a lot of people are talking about that. We have a lot of books that tell you how to do things, and the self-help books, and which is great. But when you make the commitment, that's all on you. So think about it in these terms. As I build momentum toward the hurdle, I come out of the blocks, I'm building momentum towards a hurdle. I have to choose whether or not I'm going to take the penultimate step and leap off the ground across the barrier. My coach can't do that for me. My wife can't do that for me. The screaming fans in the stand can't do that for me. The announcer can't do that for me. I have to make the commitment. And that's where I hang my hat. And that's very difficult work. I'm not for everybody, because, I've had to go through it, and I'm going to be very critical on making sure we don't go left or right with the blinders, to keep the blinders tight instead of very wide and broad. Because if I hear you start talking about other people or society, other people trying to believe for what we can or cannot do, and I didn't do it because of this family member or because of that, or I hear society come in there, I'm going to say, but what is your commitment to this? What are you thinking about this? And we don't like being in that moment where it's on us. We're very good at putting it out on everyone else, myself included. And I have to be the one to focus it in. I just did the other day, trying to blame someone on somebody else, when I need to take ownership and commitment to what I have said I was going to do. And then when we make it to the other side on that commitment, and I call it the rebirth now, or in the new normal mindset, I now have to unlearn what I have learned. And I said that once before, but here's what I mean in practicum. We just talked about we didn't talk about the Paralympic Games in Sydney, but we did talk about Paralympic Games as a swimmer. When I started at the hospital, I had to relearn how to do everything as far as walking was concerned. Right? It was not to go to the Paralympic Games. I didn't know anything about them. I had to actually learn how to get up out of my bed into a wheelchair. I had to learn how to wheel myself out to my prosthetic appointments. I had to learn how to walk between, put on an artificial leg. I had to learn how to walk between the parallel bars safely. I had to learn how to go to a 4-bar walker, from the 4-bar walker to crutches, from crutches to a cane to free walking to swimming. And then later on, swimming to running to jumping, and jumping to a second Paralympic Games and a medal. But that process, Chris, took 6.5 years. And we're thinking that if I make a commitment, I got it. I don't need to do any other work. No, we got research to do. We have to unlearn in order to learn. We talked about it earlier in a pre-call. Now we're talking about how much in society right now, what we're trying to learn. Go back to how we just kind of came into the conversation, whether or not we're going to actually learn the entire history of the United States of America, or we're just going to pull out a segment that's most comfortable for us. Germany's done it. Germany talks about the Holocaust. They teach it in their curriculum so that they will never repeat something like that, and they honor that in their form. And do we do that? Do we follow that path? Or do we say, no, we have our history. We're going to wave the American flag. We're only going to keep it. We've already come to, the stanza of our in the line in our national anthem that we have our freedoms are already there. We don't need to do any more work. We have arrived. Or are we still striving for a more perfect union? Right. So that's what we have to answer for ourselves. And some people say we're there, and some people want to go back, and we can't go back. And some people say that we're not there. So it's all on how we're going to make that commitment.
And we hear, give us you're tired, you're hungry, you're poor. And in this side of your mouth, let's build a wall.
Let's build a wall. So are we aligning with our values? And I get it. There are going to be people on both sides. But again, why are you on that side and on that fence? Make your commitment to it. What are you doing? If you were the one coming in and to the country from your forefathers that were coming in and a wall was put up for them to say, go back, because, there's genocide going on in your country. We don't want you, go back there. What would you do? And so that's the thing of what we would do and how we can empathize. That's what made America different than other countries, right? So that's my, kind of comment soapbox on that one, right?
Right before the break, you're mentioning justification. We hear all the time about the relation of fear and courage, that it takes courage to overcome fear. You focus on the relation between fear and truth. In fact, you've said, when our fear outweighs truth, then we can live a life of justification. Talk about fear and truth and what you mean about living a life of justification.
Yeah. So what I mean by that, really, if you kind of go on my LinkedIn page, right, you'll see a banner, and the banner says, when truth outweighs fear, we'll commit to a courageous life. Usually when I'm doing keynote addresses, I lead the audience with an action step, and that action step is to not fill the rest of that in. So when truth outweighs fear, what will you do? ... So that's for you. Again, we're going back to the individual. The justification piece comes when we're living on that fear side of the equation. And we begin justifying to ourselves and to others why we were not courageous enough to make the commitments that we knew we needed to make, but something held us back. And usually that fear is in ourselves. We fear we want to go back to a previous state. The fear is of other people believing for us what we can or cannot do, which is based upon what they believe they could or could not do if they were in our situation, or society. What has society dictated to us to make us be fearful in the first place? So quick side story. When I'm 6 years old, I'm watching Captain Hook in the movie Peter Pan on the Walt Disney's Channel, right? Captain Hook, he's dark and mysterious, got that weird mustache looking thing. I'm 6 years old. He's got this hook, this claw, this arm that's scaring the Lost Boys, scaring me. It's meant to do that. But wait a minute. Now, fast forward, I'm an amputee. Is because of my artificial leg? Does that remind people of Captain Hook and why we should be afraid of others? What is society telling us? When I was building the program for the military sport program, one of the greatest challenges when people said, thank you for your service, was to remind them of these people, these soldiers, men and women who've been burned over 90% of their body, that were getting scrubbed in Brooke Army Medical Center. And now they're being discharged to sit across from their families. Yet we celebrate on Halloween the Nightmare on Elm Street. And we see these people with disabilities disfigured, burned over their bodies, and we're supposed to be afraid of them. Is that how we're saying thank you for your service to these veterans who are now across from their families and their children? So their children be seeing them as nightmares on Elm Streets or wherever street they're growing up on? God forbid. Right? We don't ever want that, but we are passive when we go out and we watch the new movie and we see the new flick that's out there, and many of the villains have disfigurements or mental health issues. And now we're afraid of that in our society because we've been conditioned to it. So that's what I mean. Do we hold on to those things and embrace those fears, and do those fears create a blockage of the momentum that we need to jump and make the commitment that we know we need to make to get on the truth side of the equation?
Let's go back to your book, 10 Power Stories to Impact Any Leader, Journal Your Way to Leadership Success. So your book was published in May of 2020. It was released obviously early during the COVID pandemic, but I'm guessing you started writing it before the COVID lockdown.
I did not.
You did not.
So here's what happened.
I guess never assume, right?
Well, I mean, you can assume, maybe right, maybe wrong. Here's what happened. I had gotten back from a trip in Dubai where I saw a lot of leaders, and then I after that trip in Dubai in right at the beginning of the pandemic, it was then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo asked me to come in and talk to all of the ambassadors and charge d'affaires. And I saw that there was a lot of, I won't say fear, but ambiguity. And what do we do? How do I build my team? How do I support this team in an environment that we've never been through before? So I was asked to come in and kind of share some of those messages. And I realized that I can't get to every one of these locations around the world. How can I get these ambassadors and charge d'affaires to bring their own story and cause that? So I wrote 10 power stories of 10 stories that I just have in the can that I don't really share on audiences and stages. And I put that in with what I learned from those, coupled with a workbook that allows people to journal the story that they are hearing as they read my story. So now they get a chance to have their own story in a time of crisis. Because I had a great boss, her name's Colleen Amstein, when I was working for the Better Opportunity for Single Soldiers program. She said, John, always work yourself out of a job. And so that was my way of working myself out of becoming a professional speaker, right? It was to help others tell their own journey stories. And that's really why I wrote the book. It was very quick. It's not the book I really wanted to write, but it was that book, and it was a necessity, I believe, for at the time of that people needed it. And it showed in the way that folks bought it. It was only on Kindle. I didn't put it out like paperback. Was trying to do that right now, but I wanted something to get out there real fast for them. And it went to like #1 on all the like Amazon, like all the categories. It was like for like a 5 seconds, and I got the screenshot real quick to prove it, right? So it was, and I didn't really promote it. I just kind of just put it out there and just offered it, right, as here's a help for you. And I think that's what we should be doing for others, helping us all get through these times and showing up for each other in that capacity of service.
Why and how did you choose those 10 stories over other stories you must have gathered over your life?
Oh, I think they were the ones that were most prominent for me, right? So I tell a story of my son, and it was of what he taught me, right? So I'm trying to teach you. Let me tell you how I learned from a 6-year-old. And, we used to, after church, we used to run down a little country church. My wife, we got married in a little country church and in Arkansas. So after church, we would race down to this little creek. He was like 3 years old, 4 years old. And, like kids, they always want to win. So they step in front of you to try to block you and cut you off. So we did that. And when I had my amputation, my son, he's now 6 years old. He says, "Hey, Dad, let's race down to the creek again," right? It's like 100 meters. And I said, I can't, right? I had this leg. It was hurting. The sweat was coming through. I was getting fever blisters, and I just could not run on. I didn't even know how to run on it. So I had to look at him and come and say to him in this moment, I can't, as your father, I can't do this. I just can't physically do this for you. And so then he looks back at me and says, "Well, Dad, can we just walk down there?" And that's the moment I realized it's not about the race. It's about the relationship. So the point is, for all of us, how are we showing up for each other? How are we trying to race? Are we trying to just get through this pandemic? Or are we trying to build the relationships that are going to have us have longevity of these relationships? If we're building the race, what we find is people are having the great resignation because you're not concerned about my well-being. In many cases, I know some others are other than that, but are you concerned about me as a person, or are you just concerned about the race of making revenue for your company and not concerned about my well-being? Those are the things that we have to ask ourselves the question. I can't answer that question for you. Only you can. Only you can make the jump you need to make in life.
You talk about the race. And I personally am looking to race through COVID. I'm done with it. I'm sick of it. I'm over Zoom, and hopefully this Omicron wave is it. Fingers crossed, God willing. But in terms of what we've learned over the last 2 years, as individuals, about ourselves, about our families, about our colleagues, et cetera, about the world, I've talked a lot about over the last year and a half during this about mental health, and how the one good thing I think about COVID-19 is it's put a positive spotlight on mental health, because you see all kinds of news stories now about children, elderly folks, veterans, obviously, who need the interaction. What can we do now as we look to a new world order? And that is, we made it through the pandemic, now an endemic, hopefully, God willing. When COVID started, we had George Floyd, and that was just the world didn't know what to do. The United States was on fire. And it's something that, we talked earlier, hasn't changed in 60 years.
Yeah.
God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, shut your mouth and listen, right? What can we do now to help each other through this next chapter in civilization and society as the bright shining light on the hill for this great nation of ours?
Well, I just think you said it in part of the presenting of your question is civility. Are we showing up civil? If we're fighting each other, we're not civil. We're not being civil. There's another way to have discourse without bringing fisticuffs. As I said in the first part of the show, it was my uncle and my father that taught me to fight with the pen. We fought with the pen when we first founded the nation. Those individuals that signed the Declaration of Independence were signing their death warrants, is what they were doing, to come against King George. If you think that we can appease people and they will eventually come around to the way that we think about how our nation was first begat, how we first started. We first took it away. We wrestled it away from the Native Americans that were here, the indigenous people. Secondly, we were then coming with King George and in England at that time. They wanted to expand and colonize. And we said, nah, we're going to keep your tea in the Boston Harbor. It was a fight that happened. Power does not yield itself. Power is taken. Now you can have status. Status is, people fight for status. That's how England did such great work, because people will fight for the status that they want, but those in power, they're not giving away power. They're going to have others fight for the status that's there. So we have to learn of civility. We've taken civics out of our classes, our classrooms, and we don't even know the basics of the three powers of the three branches of government any longer, right? How many Americans have we seen on television that when they're asked what are the three branches of government, they don't know? We've taken that out. And so now we're trying to insert our belief system on somebody that has given us what to believe. And so we have to go back to learn, right? Is what am I going to do to educate myself? I have a whole process now. I just came out after my mom. We talked about my mom, and she passed away. And one of the things that she always taught me was, kind of follow through on your commitments, right? So I did some things after her death that were a follow through on her commitments, because she would be coming up and waking up from their grave talking about, you didn't do that commitment, right? She was on me about that. And I think what happens is, we don't follow through on that. And we want other people to learn the information for us. We want it really quick. We want the Burger King. We want the McDonald's. We want the Amazon shows up at my doorstep every morning, right? So we want the commitment, that we want the ease of it. We don't want to do the work. And I think we have to get back to really doing the work and understanding, where we are. I have, after being on one of 35 co-chairs for President Obama during his re-election, I got a chance to see behind the curtain on both the Romney side and the Obama side, more on the Obama side than the Romney side, but really smart people on both sides of the coin, right? But what it taught me was, number one, I don't want to go into politics. That's not my bag, right? It also taught me that there's facts that are out there, and we choose which facts we're going to share with information. We hold information back in order, and instead of letting people just do true journalism, and you make the choice because you've done the work. So if you really want to you listen to some other stations, I go outside the U.S. to actually hear what other people are saying about the U.S. because it's mostly unjaded news, right? They're just reporting on what the facts are. So I don't have to listen and kind of filter down through whether it's one station left or one station right. I can get an unbiased opinion of it. And that kind of shapes how I see the lens I see different issues that are going on. And it gives me a global perspective of how that actually inserts itself into the world, because I'm a global speaker, not a national speaker, right? So I have to understand how this impacts the entirety, what I say impact the entirety of the world. I just spoke over in Dubai I was asked to go on another trip from our State Department on disability, on the UN's United Nations Disability World Disability Day, and to host a conference at the Expo 2020 Dubai, which is now Expo 2021 because of the coronavirus. And in that, I had to realize and shape my comments around a global lens, right? It wasn't, yes, I'm in the American pavilion, but I have, 8, 9 other countries that are in there listening to the conversation. So the framing has to be with a global lens and not saying top down, America knows best. What can we also learn from it? So that's a very unique skill set in which to do, because everybody can't do it because they don't have that lens. They only get one viewpoint or another, which makes you myopic, in my opinion.
A moment ago, you shared the story about your then 6-year-old son and,
Yep.
and what you learned as a person, as a father, as an individual. And then just now you're talking about civics and the 3 branches of government. My 9-year-old son in 4th grade is studying the 3 branches of government right now.
Yes.
And he was asking me the other day, well, Dad, if all branches are equal, then why does the president have veto authority? And how can the Senate go into filibuster? And why is there a minority whip and a majority whip? And I'm like, wow, it's amazing if we just exactly
those are the
from them.
questions, right?
Yes.
That's
and they're
the
asking them at
learning.
6 and 9 years old, absolutely agree. And to have that openness and that open-mindedness and to want to have that yearning to learn, makes me feel good about the future of our country. There's kids like that out there.
And why was it put in the first place, right? What was the original intent?
Yep.
Right? So you have to be understand. We don't have time to go into all that stuff today.
Next show.
But yeah, I think that's the learning. And if we don't know it, it's not a lick on you. It's learn it. That's the onus. It's on you. Commit to learning.
And I've spoken before. I was mostly raised by my grandparents. I had a single mom. My grandfather used to always say, "Don't do as I do as I say." And those aren't really words to live by, and certainly not words to raise a child by. And so one thing I've also learned and taken advantage of being at home for the last almost 2 years is to learn from my kids. I've got 3 kids here, and my 9-year-old son is now reteaching me things to think about and open your mind. And you said relearn earlier in the show.
Relearn, yep.
And so it's a powerful and positive thing. And so I appreciate you raising that. So because Next Step Forward is about personal empowerment, we often make the point that all of us are leaders in one form or another. If nothing else, we need to effectively lead ourselves. What lessons can someone who doesn't necessarily lead a big organization learn from your book?
Yeah, I think what the greatest lesson is that you have a story. You have not only the business story, and that's what most people gravitate to. A lot of books are out there on business stories and how to tell that, but you have a story, a personal story. And the personal stories are the ones that really resonate in times of crisis. I mean, it's great to come up with your values and it's great to come up with your mission statements and those type of things, your vision. But when people are hurting, they want to know that you empathize with them. Another great speaker out there, Brene Brown, she does great work within talking about this kind of topics as well. I would encourage you to, follow her. But just think about it from the standpoint that you have a story. And if you become vulnerable with your story in times of stress, in times of crisis, people, they will come alongside you. You will be the leader because you're going to lead from an inspirational standpoint. In our company, we say that inspiration is the catalyst to motivation. Many people peg me as a motivational speaker. I'm really not. I mean, that's what gets me gigs and bookings and things because they think I'm motivational, but it's really inspirational. And the difference is that inspiration is the catalyst to motivation. Motivation causes actions. Actions lead us to transformational results. And these results, they re-inspire us or allow other people that are watching the process to catch the vision. And so the measuring stick for that, the measuring tool is for us is to creating echo effects. So as ripples go out from us, that the whole inspirational cycle is a ripple effect that goes out, it gets bigger and bigger, but echoes come back. So when it hits resistance, it'll come back to you to course correct you. Mammals like in the water, dolphins and whales, they send out echolocation, tell them where the food is at. They comes back to them. People who are blind and visually impaired, they sometimes use echolocation. How big is a room? How small is a room? Where's this corridor? And they can use it very effectively. And in our lives, we have moments that people will tell us what they're hearing, even if they have not heard it from us in the first place, and it came from somebody else. You tell somebody, they tell somebody else, and all of a sudden a person makes a change in their life off of what you said, and it comes back to you. I won't go into, I got plenty of stories on that, but those are our measurement tools in our company, is what comes back. Are we on the right path? Are we delivering the value our clients really need, to let them ask the hard question, but also help them to not have phantom pains, right? I get phantom pains all the time in my leg, which reminds me of a previous life of when I had 2 limbs, but I don't have 2 limbs. It's only a phantom pain. It will pass. And so I have to, even though the phantom pain might come there and somebody might remind you of something, you have already come past that. And so how we get you past that phantom pain to elevate into the moment of resolve, where I know exactly who I am. I know exactly how I'm showing up, because I've done the work, I've done the education, and now you need to bring that back into it. I'm never going back that way. You need to catch up to where I am.
In addition to being an author, you're also a motivational speaker and a TEDx speaker. How'd your speaking career begin?
Through the military. Drill sergeant. No. I was hosting events for a program, the World Class Athlete Program. After I got out, I started working for the World Class Athlete Program, and I had a group of athletes, and I worked with total Army involvement in recruiting, trying to put troops in boots. We would go to schools. I would be the host, the MC. I would tell a story, and I would introduce the next athlete speaker. After I got back home I was living in Springfield, Virginia, recruiters called me up and said, hey, the kids in the schools are really resonating with your message. Can you come back down here and offer them like a 40-minute presentation in an assembly? Principals want you back in the school. So they're not dummies, right? They want to get back in the school so they get more troops and boots. So I said, yeah, I'll come do that. Then they said the magic words. How much do you charge for that? And I said, let me get back to you on that one. I was playing like what I know now is kind of country dumb. You kind of hold back a little bit to understand, and then you go back understand what you don't know. And that began the whole career of professional speaking. Now it's very poignant, right? I'm getting so dialed in. I'm not. When the pandemic hit, a lot of my friends went to become coaches and trainers and all this stuff. I went deeper into my content, deeper into the message. And so now our vision really is to inspire worlds. The outcome of our message is focused on that inspirational cycle that I shared with you to create that echo effect. And then the mantra is to go forth and inspire your world, right? Because go is the command. Forth is the direction, inspire is the vocation, because only you can do this work and world, because it's your sphere of influence. Our clients are either about to make a commitment or have made a commitment to to something that they know they need to do in their life. And we're going to make sure that is what we are targeted on. And that's how we show up. If we're outside those lanes, it's not that we can't do it, but we're going to try to find somebody that can actually help you in that moment. So that's where we hang our hat right now as a company.
I read an article a few weeks ago that the word for 2022 is resilient, but I want to use a word you just use, inspire. We need to be inspirational now.
Yes. Yeah.
So we have just a few minutes left. Regular listeners and viewers know one of my favorite questions for an author is, do you have another book in the works?
I do.
Sneak peeks?
Yeah. Sneak peek. Sneak peek is the one I really wanted to write, the Hurdle Adversity book. So that's out there. I'm putting that together right now. And it's going to be all these kind of lessons in that. It's an autobiography, but it's going to be peppered with these learning points inside of it. And hopefully some other surprises that will be there that can actually engage the reader in the book itself. So as you're reading, I think it's really important that we're learning along the journey, right? So it's just not just read the book, but actually learn as we go through, because I learn just as much as anybody else does by going through this process. So hopefully it will be out. I know hope's not a plan, but it's a start and beginning. That it will be there middle of the year. I try to get it down, but prayerfully be out the actually third quarter of this year.
And how can people in our audience reach out to you for speaking events?
The fastest way is my website, which is johnregister.com. John, JOHNREGISTER.com. For those that want to kind of connect with me on all the social media and kind of see everything in one place, there's a link tree that I have. It's linktRee.com and then /John F. Register. So linktree.com/John F. Register. Everything is there. We try to make it very easy for folks, and we want to support. We want to know what you're dealing with so that we can offer and be of service. Whether it's us that comes in to do a presentation, and we do those in keynote addresses, we do them in trainings. We have a Leadership USA that we're just doing, a leadership program that I'm working with a wonderful woman, Kat Coppett, she's an amazing soul, and so we are putting together CEO executive type retreats for them to listen, because they didn't get a chance to listen during COVID a lot. They were reactive. So we're trying to push in that space as well. So a lot of things on the horizon, and we just thank you so much, Chris, for this opportunity to be on your show. I hope that the listeners out there engage with us. We want that conversation. New program just started up once a month. Go on LinkedIn, go find that one. LinkedIn is my linkedin.com/in/John Register. I think it is. I think that's what it is. But I have a friend of mine now, Daniel, we just met over in Dubai, and we just started some leadership stuff, just talking about how to build teams. And we're going to do it once a month. So come on out there. Look at the last one. We just did it yesterday for the first time.
We'll be there. John Register, you're an absolute inspiration, a terrific leader, and somebody I'm proud to call a new friend. So thank you so much for your time. It's an absolute honor. Thanks to our viewers and listeners for joining us here this week. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Until then, stay safe. Keep taking your next steps forward.